Hey guys, welcome to lecture 4 of my HTML and CSS course for beginners. My name is Abhi. So at this point, I decided to structure the videos a bit differently. So I'm making this part 1 of lecture 4, and then I'll make another video up for part 2. I'm doing this to separate the lesson from the exercises. So part 1 will be the lesson, and then part 2 will be the exercise. This will make it a bit easier and also will shorten each video so it doesn't make it too long. Okay, so basically in this lecture, or like last lecture actually, let's start with that. So last lecture we did image and anchor tags. In this lecture we're going to learn divider and list tags. Divider and list tags are actually my favorite, and they're mostly what I use in many of my projects, so I'm very excited to walk you through that in today's lesson. So if you're okay with that, let's get started. Okay guys, so to get started, I already set up our lecture 4 and lecture 4 exercise folder, which lecture 4 exercises is for part 2. And in the lecture 4 folder, I already set up our index.html file and our style.css file. So in our index.html file, let's start with our HTML structure. So from the last lecture, I taught you a very efficient way of making the HTML structure because sometimes it's tiring for people to write out the whole structure. So it's basically shift on the keyboard and then the exclamation mark, which is holding down the 1, and you press enter. So let me just size out this a bit. Okay, so there we go. Now we're gonna change the title to div and list practice, div and list lesson. So div and list lesson, and actually I'll do list divider. Alright, so now we're gonna link our style.css file. I want to make sure I do this so I don't forget about it. So there is an efficient way to do the style.css file too. We can just type link and :css. If we type :css, it'll just also, if we press enter, it'll also do the href, which is high reference, and it'll just type out the style.css. If you just type out link, it won't do the style.css for you. So if your file is usually you name it style.css, then probably link :css is the best efficient way to do it. If you name your files differently, then probably you can just do link. Alright, so anyway, let's get started. So we're gonna start with div tags. So div tags are just basically a container. They're just like a box around the elements. You can put like different elements in a divider. So basically, for example, we have our body, which is the body tag is basically the whole web page. Let's say I put a heading tag on there. So let's say I put heading tag hello world. So when we do that and press refresh, we get our hello world. So when I do this, there's a concept we have to learn here. So the concept is hierarchy. So the body tag, or like the web page, which is the body tag, is the parent element. And on the parent element, we are putting a heading tag which says hello world. That's the same concept that applies with divider tags. So to do divider tags in HTML, we do less than angular bracket, div, and then I'm gonna put a class for this. So because usually it's common for divider tags to have a class and not an ID, but if you want to add an ID, you can do that. I'm just used to classes a lot, so I'm gonna call this container, which is a very common name for divider tags, and we're gonna put a greater than angular bracket there, and Visual VS Code gives our closing tag. So now we're gonna hit enter. So divider tags I'm gonna mention are blocked elements, and remember, block elements meaning any element goes below it. So, and obviously we can tinker this with CSS with the display property. Alright, so we created our div tag. Now let's put the heading tag inside the div tag this time. So when we do this, we don't see anything because we actually don't have a background color, so let's add that. So we're going to add a background color to container, so we're going to do dot container, and remember dot is for classes, and then we're going to put our curly brackets, and we're basically going to put a background color. So we're using the background color property, and do not forget the hyphen. So I'm going to put like something like beach. Or actually, let's, yeah, so beach. And when we do that, now we see that we can see the container forming around the heading tag. And like I said, div tags are block tags, are block elements, so they take up the whole space and any element goes below it. So now we can obviously tinker this with the display property. So display property, we can say inline block, and now it won't take up the whole space. So there we go, now it doesn't take up the whole space. Now let's add another element. So let's add a paragraph element this time. So let's do hello, my name is Abby. And basically let's do that, and it refreshes. So basically now we have hello, my name is Abby. So the div tag will automatically lengthen as we put more elements in. And we can and if you wanted to have a specific height, you don't want it to like just lengthen when you put more elements, you can put a height, like a default height with the height property, and we can just say like 100 pixels. And actually, let's do something like 300 pixels there. Okay, so now it lengthens, so it won't go, it might lengthen a bit still, but it still will stay in the 300 pixel area. So so as we put more elements in, it won't really like lengthen. So we have two elements here. So now let's say we want to style the heading tag. So the thing with divider tags is we can't just say h1 and just style it. We can't do that. We have, since it's hierarchy, remember the hierarchy concept, which is the parent element and the child elements. So to do this, we need to first call the parent element, which is the container. So container, which is our div tag. So we need to call that first. We need to say we want to go inside the div tag, and then we want to go inside. We want to tinker with the heading tag. So we need to say h1, like it says here. So h1, and then we're going to put our curly brackets, and that now we can style our heading tag without any problems. So remember hierarchy, parent and child elements. So recap, we need to do for call the div tag first with its class name. Then we need to call the child element inside the div tag, which is our h1. So now let's just put some styles for the heading tag. So some styles we could do our font size, like we learned in the previous lectures. We're gonna set this to probably 50 pixels. Okay, so there we go. Now probably let's set a color, a text color. So let's do I like red. Let's do that. So now we have a text color. So okay, so probably that's enough for the heading tag. So now we can do the paragraph tag. So the paragraph tag, remember, we need to call our div tag first, and then we can do p, which is our paragraph tag. So now we do our curly brackets, and let's just say we want to do like we want to add a color, and we'll do blue this time. So blue. Now let's say I want to make it a bit bigger, so let's do font size 20 pixels. Okay, so now let's add another div tag. How about that? So we can add another div tag, and we can really see the inline block. We can really see it go beside the div tag. So instead of just writing a whole nother div tag, we can just highlight this and copy it. So I believe it's Command C on Mac and Control C on Windows, I believe. So let's copy that and paste it here. Okay, so now we have another div tag here. Now let's add some margin. Because this doesn't look good, right? So let's add some margin. So we're going to basically add a margin to using the margin property in the container. So we'll add like 30 pixels margin. So there we go. It moves it slightly, but we don't need to worry about that right now. But here we have our margin and we have some space, and now it looks better. Okay, so now now actually let's do something else. Let's do padding. Padding is a really important thing with div tags. So let's do a padding for both. Let's do 20 pixels padding. Okay, so now we know padding is inside space, not outside. So outside is the margin. Inside space is the padding. So, okay, so that's all about div tags, pretty much. That's the basics. So let's go over list tags. So list tags are also very important. They let you add lists and you can do different list styles. So how about we add a list into one of our div tags? So the list tag is in li, so we do less than angular bracket, li, and then greater than angular bracket. So basically now let's do hello world. I'm just gonna do the same thing as the heading tag. So let's remove this div tag for now, so we don't have it like, we don't need to get distracted by that or like have it there. We can just tinker with this. So now we have our list tag, and it's li. So the list tag has a bullet point. By default, they all have bullet points. Now let's we need to learn a property, a very important property for the list tag. So let's do dot container. We need to call our div tag first. Then we need to do li. So we're going to do our curly brackets. And the very important property is called list style. So list list hyphen style is where if you can do none, and what this will do is it'll remove the bullet point. And usually list tags are very helpful because when you use paragraph tags, you need to use a special element called a break element to break down the lines. And what a break element is basically just BR. It kind of like breaks the lines like that. But that one is not a very good way of adding a description. So a good way of adding a description is using a list tag. And the list tag more formats it into a list, and it's a better format than a paragraph tag where you have to add break lines everywhere, and that's not a good practice. So, but then when you don't like the bullet points, you don't really need the bullet points, you can just use the list style property and you can just remove the bullet points. Okay, so now there's not much about lists, but we can add a few properties to it. So we can do some margin. We can do text align. Yeah, text align center. So if we do text align center, that centers the text like any text is. So then we can do color. Let's add a color. So green. And there we go. It changes color. So the last property we'll add is a font size. So font size, we're going to add 30 pixels. Okay, so now it's a bit bigger, so that's good. And yeah, so that's pretty much all about div tag and list tags, really like what you need to know. So basically, remember, a div tag, it adds a border. It's like not like a border, but it adds like a container around the element, and it adds like a second parent element, and inside the body tag, which is the dominant parent element, I would call it, because like you're at like the web page is the body tag, so that's the parent element. The div tag is the child element of the body element, and then all these heading and paragraph tags and list tags are all the child elements in the div elements. And if you want to go a bit better, you can say the body element is the grandfather element of the heading and paragraph tag and list tags, but no one really uses the grandfather thing here, but you can just say parent and child element. So that's really the hierarchy we need to understand to work with divider tags. Because there is another concept with, I'm not going to teach you this because it's a bit complicated, but and it's also a bit confusing too. It's called the nested layouts technique, and it's basically vertical and basically just nested div tags into div tags. That one is complicated, but that one is like, that's a thing you need to know hierarchy for. You need to know parent and child elements to work, how to work with those, so you can work with nested layouts. And then list tags are just adding lists, like that's just the ordinary lists. And you can use list style to remove the bullet points if you ever need to. And list tags are really helpful when you want to add descriptions line by line, and you don't really want to add a paragraph tag and then add break elements all over, and that's just a messy, bad practice. Okay, so that's all, and then I'll see you guys in part 2, where we'll do the exercise, and it's a very good exercise, guys. So wait until part 2, and we'll do the exercise. So I'll see you guys there.